desktop only. Here we go. Now I should have sound and everything. There. So now that we're all set up that way, welcome. Thank you for bearing with me. I'll say that sound started, well, I don't see the time on this, but sound started at about 1 minute and 35 seconds, huh? So, that'd be good. Okay, put that in the comments here, and now I've just about got it. If I seem just a hair out of sorts, I'm recovering from a migraine, but I'm happy to be here. A lot happier than I might look. Sometimes my face, well, just, you can't help what your face does sometimes. So sometimes my face doesn't look like I'm as happy as I am, but I'm glad to be here. Someone actually was watching and said, smile more. And I feel like I'm a pretty happy person, but almost every single thumbnail that I see on the video, my eyes are half closed and I don't look very happy. And so I'm imagining that YouTube and Facebook probably picked that exact frame for my thumbnail. We can check that afterward. But glad to be able to do this today. Our question at hand is, when does helping become enabling? And what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk a little bit about the connotations of that, because whenever we say helping, it has certain meanings to it, and whenever we say enabling, it has certain meanings and ideas to it. And then I wanted to perhaps reshape our paradigm of that. Whenever I think of a paradigm, I think of, for instance, how we might learn languages, and you see the inflections, how endings or beginnings go on different words, and you have a paradigm for those. Whenever this ending's put on, then this is what happens to this word. It becomes past tense, or it becomes a plural, or something like that. Whenever we're talking about changing that paradigm, then we might be misunderstanding the language because the paradigm's wrong. And so we change the idea of our understandings of the endings, and we say, oh, that means something different. We understand it now. Whenever I'm looking at this concept of changing the paradigm regarding helping, it might be that we have trouble helping because we have different beginnings and different endings in mind, and if we adjust those, that can help us. And so when we're looking at helping, when does helping become enabling, most of you are listening, and when you hear enabling, you think of what we typically consider hurting somebody because you've given them something that's enabling them to continue in some kind of bad habit, an addiction, poor living choices of some kind. And there was a great comment made by Jamie Eastlick when she said that we're enabling when we're not allowing them to feel the consequences of their choices. That's my paraphrase of that, but it was an excellent point. And there's a balance in that, isn't there? When we're raising children, there's a sense in which they need to recognize there are consequences for our actions. And then there are things that we say, well, does the punishment meet the crime? And if we can insulate them some from what it is that they've done, through no fault of their own, they're trying the best they can to learn to drive, and they hit something. Do we say, okay, well, here's the bill, here's you're not allowed to drive for a year, or whatever? That might be a little far. However, depending on how they were involved in it, we might decide that they will bear some part of the fix of the vehicle or something like that. But if someone goes if someone goes through the important years of their life and they never learned that whenever they make bad decisions, then there are bad consequences, they may very well, or they likely will go into their adulthood doing that, making bad decisions, and then wondering why bad things happen, and blaming other people and other things. So that concept of enabling is whenever we're reducing the consequences for someone in a way that they will just continue the way they are with no motivation to change. That's commonly how we think of it. But the word to enable is a good word by itself, isn't it? And so looking at this idea of, oh, well, thank you very much, June. Looking at this idea of when does helping become enabling, what I wanted to sort of shift is our thinking about stopping helping versus helping differently. Because sometimes we say, when does helping become enabling? And we say, okay, now we've got to stop. And that can be painted as unloving or unkind, unhelpful. Whenever we will consider then what do we want to help someone with, how or when do we start, and where or when do we end, then we look at enabling in the positive light and say, if I am enabling someone in a positive way, then what am I doing? I'm trying to help them do something. To enable all by itself is to prepare, make capable of accomplishing something. You might be equipping, you might be promoting, you might be edifying, something that's helping someone in a direction. So any kind of help we give is an enablement in the positive sense. And so what I wanted to encourage us to do to help us find that line of when does helping become enabling is say, whenever we're helping someone, we're enabling them to do something, but is the thing we're enabling them to do good? Is that what we're going for? Because that will help us. So I say, okay, if I provide this kind of help, what have I enabled them to do? And if I've enabled them to move toward some good end that I'm aiming for, then I've enabled them in a good way. So I know some of you might be watching and saying, well, enablement I'm looking at as a bad thing. Yes, but what I'm saying is this can help guide the kind of help that we give if we ask a more foundational question. I'm always enabling somebody. Even if I don't do something, and sometimes I'm enabling someone to just go on. I don't stop the guy who took somebody's purse and I had the ability to do it. I have enabled him in that activity. So if I think about it that way, then I can just start saying, not when do I stop, but I'm enabling someone to do something. So what am I enabling them to do? And when we look at the broader picture of life, what you should want if you're a Christian is you want to enable someone to live their lives faithfully. You want to enable someone to go to heaven forever. And that's our ultimate goal. Now, with all goals, you've got your big goals and your little goals. There will be things in the middle, shorter term goals that we need to work out. So keeping that in mind, though, and having that paradigm shift, what's the end of this? It's not just getting the person food. It's not just trying to see that they get the help they need and quit drugs. That's a big part of it. And there are steps from here to there. But it's for the purpose of them being faithful to God and going to heaven. And that's going to help me direct that. And instead of saying, when do I stop helping? I'm asking the question, the help that I'm giving, what is it enabling them to do toward that end? One guiding principle I regularly use, we brought up in Bible class actually last night, is Matthew chapter 7 and verse 12. You'll recognize it often called the golden rule. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Sometimes we misunderstand this by abusing it and saying, well, if I were them and I were addicted to drugs, I'd want someone to keep me at... No. It's not based on them and their limited perspective. It's not based on an inaccurate perspective. What this is based upon is a disciple of Christ with eternity in mind, saying, if I were them, knowing what I know, what would I want someone to do for me, to me? And that can help us whenever we're looking at it. And when we put ourselves in their position, but through the lens of biblical authority, and with the goal of eternity in mind, then we're asking some of the right questions. If I give them $20, is that enabling them to do the right thing? And or am I trying to salve my conscience and feel better because I did something about it? If I put myself in a position where I'm not safe, where I'm hurting myself in order to help them, that's not always wrong to do, but is it necessary? Is it something that will truly help this goal as we move on? So when does helping become enabling? We're always enabling someone to do something, but when helping becomes enabling in that negative aspect is when what we're enabling them to do is detrimental to their spiritual well-being, and we're promoting lifestyle choices that if continued would leave them lost. Sometimes when we decide that we're going to stop enabling in a negative way and we're going to start enabling with eternity in mind, it begins to look like things that people don't want. Someone says, I need $1, give me $1, and you find out the reason that they got in the place that they are isn't because they don't get enough money given to them, but because of the way that they spend the money. Then it doesn't seem like a fun way to help. But if that person would be willing to, here's a short-term goal toward the long-term, right? But if that person would be willing to change their lives by doing something like considering their budget. How is it that you budget? Where does your money go day to day? Do you have a job? They don't. And someone might say, what's that have to do with their eternal well-being? Well, they've got to obey the gospel if they haven't already. And obeying the gospel and continuing to live faithfully, they should be good stewards of what they have, doing the best they can with what they possess, and part of that's their time and their ability. And we aren't permitted just to be frivolous with what we've got and then have other people take up the slack. We would be enabling that person to live a life substandard to what it is that they're able to live. And so when somebody starts saying, we want to set a budget, we want to get a job, well, that's not what I wanted. I need food right now. Now, I'm not saying don't feed them, but that feeding, because they do need food perhaps before they get a job in 2 weeks and get paid 2 weeks later, that very well can be a practical thing that needs to be overcome. But even on a bigger scale, one thing that I'm leaning toward more is just leading with the gospel. If someone is unwilling to learn about what their bigger part is in life, they're unwilling to learn about the bigger motivation in order to change their lives. We have so many gaps and so many walls separating people from where they are to where they ought to be, that it can seem like they can't get over it. You look at someone who doesn't have a job and you say, well, they need to get a job. That's an easier said than done thing. Do they have an address? Do they have a reliable source of transportation? If they don't have that seems like it's unget-overable. Or if they get a job and they're making, say, $8 an hour, that doesn't seem bad. But let's say $10 an hour. There we go. If they work an 8-hour day, that's $80. That's pretty good. Rewind back with me, this would be 23 years ago about, and I was working at Taco Bell in the middle of the winter in Ohio. It was negative double digits, and a gentleman comes in. He was one of maybe 2 customers that day because it was winter break. The students were gone from Ohio University, and some of you who were there around the time I was, you'll know who it was. He played guitar on the street, and I felt so bad for him. He always ordered a vegetarian burrito, and I made it for him. How you doing? Oh, it's cold. Yeah, you getting by okay? One of my slowest days of the year, he said. I only made $52. So I was making $5 an hour. And so I worked 8 hours that day for $40. He played guitar on the street and made $52. The math isn't that hard to figure out, that if someone begs in the right place, not saying he was a beggar, he was at least performing something, but if someone begs in the right place, they could easily get more money than they could get working a day at a job. and they're not going to be taxed for it. So why should they do something different unless they have a motivation bigger than themselves, bigger than just having another night to stay at a hotel, bigger than just getting to fulfill their next urge for a drug, something like that. And that bigger thing, ultimately for everybody, is meant to be God. It's meant to be living a life pleasing for Him. So what if we strive to enable people to grow closer to God? That's nearest in our mind. It's our ultimate goal as well. And if it would fit on the progress of a path to do that, then that fits with how we're helping them, because we want to enable them to be in a good relationship with God. And that could mean that we do make sure that they eat. It could mean that we do make sure they have a roof over their head at some point as they're trying to learn these things, but not as a bait and switch tactic, like many churches fall into, that sort of say, hey, come and we'll give you this stuff, and we might rub off on you on the way. We might tell you the gospel or something, but lead with what can really help them. Let them know what your plan is. Go to them and say, I'm so sorry for the problems in which you find yourself. And I know the solution to the biggest problem, life's biggest problem, is sin. And you might be surprised how many of them go, oh, yes. Now they might be saying it just to appeal to you because they think you might give them something. Like in Acts 3, you see the lame man fixed his eyes on Peter, supposing that he might give him gold. But you say, essentially like Peter, silver and gold have I none, but what I have I give to you. Not that you don't have any other means to help them, but you say, I want to see what it is that you need, but I know that you need the gospel. And whenever we learn to live for God, we will start putting things in the order that they need to be. Learn about them, how they got there, and this isn't a set order, but just some things to consider as we're thinking about how to help someone. Because in the end, if we've not helped someone get closer to God, but what we've done is cause them to go farther away, reinforce themselves in their bad habits or lifestyle sins, then we haven't aided them. We've actually hurt them. And in that regard, enablement, I know what it means, but it misses the point, because enable is to help do something. We've actually hurt them. When does helping become hurting? Might be another good way to look at it. And so just a thought for that, hoping for us to think about how we might help friends and family, strangers. We think about their spiritual well-being and how what we do encourages them to either be closer to or farther from God. And of course, what we want to do is we want to enable them to have a good relationship with God. But I really appreciate the time that you had to spend with me today, and you've enabled me in a good way to be able to get to share. I appreciate the good comments and thoughts and the shares that you've already had regarding this, and look forward to next week when we get together, take a look at that schedule and see what it is, and you have a good day.